Scottish Shadow Secretary. Ian Murray joins us from our Edinburgh studio. Well, first of all, Ian Murray, are all the MSPs in Labour here pro-Europe?
Well, I think the vast majority of not just Labour members but Labour supporters are pro-Europe. We see the benefits of being part of the European Union, whether it be for jobs and growth.
Do you expect any Labour MSPs to be campaigning to leave?
I don't at this stage know of any Labour MSPs that would be campaigning to leave. I do know of MPs, Kate Hoey and Kelvin Hopkins are very prominent in the Labour Out campaign, and they've held those views for a number of decades and are running that Out campaign. We're a broad church of a party, but as you've said in your introduction, both Scottish Labour and the UK Labour Party will be campaigning and putting lots of resources behind staying within the European Union because we know it's in Scotland's interest to do so.
Right, so you and all the MSPs, as far as you are aware, will all be campaigning to stay in?
As far as I'm aware, the entirety of the Scottish Labour Party and all MSPs at this stage will be campaigning to stay in. I don't know of any MSPs who share the view of being out of the European Union. I may be incorrect on that fact, but they will have a free vote in any case, and that's the right thing to do in this big issue. But we are all be campaigning very, very hard to stay within the European Union. As Gordon Brown set out there, it's in Scotland's national interest to do so.
Would you be happy to campaign with Conservatives who are in favour of staying in the European Union?
Well, we've set up our own distinct campaign, the Scotland In campaign and the Britain In campaign, run by Alan Johnson at UK level and is being launched by the Labour Movement for Europe there with Gordon Brown earlier this week. We'll be campaigning with the Labour Party, for the Labour Party to stay in. Other parties will have their own campaigns, and no doubt when you run through the referendum campaign there will be issues that we will campaign on both together and campaign on separately. But this is a distinct Labour campaign to keep Scotland and the United Kingdom in the EU.
You would be happy to share a platform with Conservatives who share your views?
Well, we'll be sharing platforms with all parties, including the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, that want to stay within the European Union. Don't forget there is a distinct referendum law in this country, which means there only can be one official in and one official out campaign. But we'll be running and putting all the resources and efforts behind a Labour In campaign. It's the right thing to do for Scotland, and that's what we'll be doing.
And what do you make of the SNP argument that should the eventuality arise that Scotland's voted to stay in but Britain voted to leave, that would somehow be justification for having another independence referendum?
Well, I think the SNP have had somewhere between 15 and 20 justifications at the moment for another independence referendum. I think we should set those arguments of last year aside and all sing from the same hymn sheet in terms of keeping Scotland and the UK in the European Union. That's the right thing to do, and that's what we should all be campaigning on with one voice, because it's good for Scottish jobs and it's good for Scottish cooperation, and there's a whole number of issues that Gordon Brown laid out in your package at the start of this interview.
But should that come to pass, how strongly do you feel about it? Do you think that the British government would be entitled to say, look, no, you've just had a vote on independence and you voted to stay in the UK, and if the UK votes to leave, that's it, you can't have another referendum?
Well, the other question is also true. What would happen if the rest of the UK voted to stay in the European Union and Scotland voted to leave? This is a UK membership of the European Union. It's a UK vote for the UK Parliament as the member state who has the membership of the European Union, and that's what we'll be fighting to keep in. The votes will be collated across the United Kingdom, and you only need one vote to win a referendum. We'll be fighting very hard to make sure it's much larger than that. And as Gordon Brown laid out on Tuesday when he launched the Labour Movement for Europe campaign to stay in the European Union, he wants to try and win this 60 or 70% to 30 to put it to bed as an issue, so we can start cooperating in Europe to make sure that we can get what we want.
Whatever scenario we talk about, there's no justification in your view for an independence referendum?
I can't see where the justification would come from. The bottom line here in terms of all of these issues with regards to referenda and independence is that the economic case for independence is worse now than it was last year. We have to do what's in the best interests of Scotland and the Scottish people, and that's why we're campaigning to stay in Europe, both at the Scottish level and at the UK level, because it's the right thing to do.
Are you still a member of the Progress Group?
I am a fully paid up member of the Progress Group, yes.
How did you feel it being described as part of a right-wing clique
by
the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer?
Well, I think some people in the Shadow Cabinet, including the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, should really ramp down the rhetoric a little bit. We're all one part of the Labour Party. We're all fighting to oppose this Conservative government at Westminster, and we're all fighting to win elections in Scotland in May. We're all part of the same team, and I think part of some of the words that he perhaps chose in that particular interview were unnecessary. Indeed, he should be trying to unite the party rather than ramping up rhetoric against parts of the party who are very loyal servants to the Labour Party, their constituents, and indeed great opposers of this austerity Conservative government.
How did you feel about Michael Duggar being fired? You took to social media to say rather nice things about him.
Well, of course, Michael's a friend, and Michael's a great servant to the Labour Party, and that's why I took to social media to say that he'll be a loss to the shadow cabinet and a loss to the front bench. But Michael is an incredibly vociferous campaigner. He will go to the back benches, and indeed will probably be a stronger thorn in the Conservative sides from the back benches than perhaps the front benches. And I quite rightly went to give some solidarity to some colleagues who had lost their jobs, because that was the right thing to do, because they're good parliamentarians and good close colleagues.
Right, so you've had your close colleagues and friends sacked, and you have been described as part of the hard right by a man who is the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. In this process, did you at any point consider doing what some other of your colleagues did and quitting the Shadow Cabinet?
I haven't considered that, no, because we need a strong Scottish voice in the Shadow Cabinet. There's a big job to do here in Scotland. My only concern at the moment is to make sure that we can put forward a policy platform for the 2016 Scottish elections that's radical, that's bold and is positive, to take the fight to the current Scottish Government and to try and win as many seats and as many votes as possible in the Scottish parliamentary elections, whilst also holding this dreadful Conservative Government at Westminster account. I had no intention of resigning from the Shadow Cabinet, because we're part of a team. We've got a big job to do as the official opposition in this country, and that's why we'll be working together as a team, which is why I think some of the language that's been used should be toned down slightly, and we need to get back to doing what we should be doing, and that's being the official opposition.
Are you now a winning team? Do you think Jeremy Corbyn can win the next general election?
Well, we fight to win every single general election. I think Jeremy Corbyn's trying to do politics differently. It's not to everyone's cup of tea, including the media, who don't like some of the things that he does. He wants to very carefully go through. But he wants to very carefully go through a policy development process. He wants to very carefully go through choosing his shadow cabinet, his shadow ministerial teams. He wants to involve as many people as he can, and he's doing that in a very considered way. This is a new way of doing politics that we all have to get used to, and I think when Jeremy gets that kind of policy platform in place and gets the kind of new politics in place that everyone wants to see and he wants to portray, I think people will see the benefit of that.
This new policy that Kezia Dugdale came out with this week about basically giving money to first-time buyers, this was money that was supposedly going to be used to help people who would be affected by George Osborne's cut tax credits.
That's correct, yes.
George Osborne has since abandoned those. I struggle to see the logic of saying money that was earmarked to help the poorest people in society should now be given as a bung to people who want to buy a house.
Well, I think you're being slightly unkind to this policy. This is a bold and radical policy that Kezia Dugdale launched on Tuesday. Policy. This isn't a bung to people who are looking to buy a house. This is to support first-time buyers who are struggling to get on the property.
It's a Tory policy. It was people who will qualify for this will have already been in a Save to Buy ISA, which is set up by the Tories, and they could have potentially got £3,000 from the Conservative government already. All you're doing is saying we'll do double Tory in Scotland.
Well, let me just work through this carefully for you, because I think it's important, rather than using words like bung and using words like using the APD money twice as being completely incorrect. The air passenger duty money was allocated to tax credits. That's no longer required to be used because of the U-turn that Labour won in the House of Lords and the Chancellor reversed in his autumn statement. So that money is available to be reallocated, and Kezia has reallocated it to this policy. So let's set that aside. The second thing is, let me just run through the hypothetical of a couple who are living together. If they were to put £100 a month each into the new Help to Buy ISA, they would have £7,200 in that ISA after 3 years. The UK government tops that up by £1,800, which takes it to £9,000, and Kezia's policy would give each couple £3,000 each to take that up to £15,000, because that's the kind of deposit that's required.
What on earth has this got to do with helping the least well-off in society?
Well, this is because 96% of first-term buyers buy a property that's less than £250,000. So this is the kind of deposit you require. It's about aspirational in terms of Scottish people who want to get on the property market. There's 75% of young Scots at the moment who think they'll never be able to buy their own home. This is the right thing to do to help them. And let me just finish on this point, because I think it's important.
Well, very briefly,
this isn't just about. But this just isn't about getting first-time buyers on the property market. This is also about putting money into the economy. There's nothing better than stimulating an economy than people buying their first home. That's important as well.
I'm tempted to ask you exactly the same question again, but I don't have time because we're out of time. But Ian Murray, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.